pattern to the movement of the universe, to the movement of the stars. Number 4 is the idea of correspondence, which is to say that there are different dimensions, okay, an infinite set of dimensions that range from the material to the divine, okay, so the body, the heart, the mind, the soul, these are all different aspects of, these are all different dimensions, okay, they all correspond to each other, and that's what enables our individuality. Then you have the law of cause and effect, where if we assume that the universe is conscious, it's fractal, it's interconnected, then whatever I do impacts you in a certain way. It's almost like the butterfly effect, where through individual action, through individual faith, we can impact the universe both in a positive or negative light. But our actions do have consequences. Then you have the law of polarity, which is to say that for every thing, there's an opposite, right? So think of yin and yang, think of thesis, antithesis. Whatever there is creates something that is opposite, okay? Then you have the law of generation, which is to say that when these opposites combine together, you create a new force, okay? So think of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, okay? And that's how the world, the universe functions. It's constantly seeking creation, it's constantly seeking generation by unifying opposing forces. And so I think that this is how the universe works. And God is the universe itself. So the movement of the universe is the consciousness of God. So we are inside God, but God is also inside us. And so once you recognize this aspect of ourselves, that we can exist in multiple dimensions, that we are both an individual as well as part of a greater collective, then I think that leads to certain actions in the world, okay? What I believe is our time in this world is short and it's precious. And we are eternal, but we have to make the most of our time here. And the Greeks have a word for this, eudaimonia, which is flourishing. So every day we should be asking ourselves, not how much money do we have, not what have I achieved, but am I flourishing as a person? Meaning, am I being my most creative self? Am I learning? Am I growing? Am I loving? And I feel as though love is the unifying force of the universe, in that when we love someone unconditionally, we open our souls to the kind of conscious. And that's what drives our imagination. And then this imagination allows us to be creative and make the world a more creative place. Because again, what happens in our mind, we're just a fractal. What happens in our mind is reflected throughout the universe. So if we are creative, the universe becomes creative itself. And so, for me, I take this to mean that my role in this world is to use my imagination to inspire others to use their imagination. And I do that through my teaching. But that's how I conceptualize my role, given my understanding of the universe. So it's not really about, like, what is God and does it exist? It's more about how can we make God smile? How can we ourselves make others smile and bring joy to the universe? Imagine that the entire world, the entire universe, both past and future, it's all watching your movement, what you do. And whatever you do today, we remember for all of eternity. And you should live accordingly to this principle. And, Immanuel Kant calls this the categorical imperative. How do you know what is good, what is just, what is moral? If you're proud of everything
I do have a few questions that I think now that we've covered a timeline and kind of your view on all of it and your takeaway, there are some takeaways that I have that I found particularly interesting from reviewing so many of your lectures the past few weeks. If you wanted to control society, would you have them believe in one God, many gods, or no God?
Okay, so I think that we've had different societies where we tried either no God, many gods, or just one God. And I think you get different societies. So the Greeks were polytheistic. At the same time, they were the most creative people ever. I mean, what they were able to accomplish in about 100 years is just mind-boggling because they basically created the foundations for modern Western civilization. And their concept of polytheism is that there are different gods competing against each other, and we're just pawns in this great game. And so that made them much more thoughtful about the reality of the universe. Like, why are we here? What's our purpose? And their deep introspection is what leads to their tremendous creative output. So that's the aspect of polytheism that I think is very encouraging in that you're always forced to ask the hard questions. One God is a recent phenomenon. And it's led us to be the most energetic people in the world, right? So think about our accomplishments where we're able to build skyscrapers. We're able to build high-speed rails. We're able to build airplanes. But no one ever asked the question, why are we doing this, right? Like, what's the point of this? And quite honestly, if you just look at human health index, people's happiness, people's health, their cancer rates, it's pretty abysmal. I mean, so having one God, monotheism, compels us into action, a sort of like frenetic, anxious action, but it's also led to tremendous human suffering. No God is just complete and utter chaos. It could lead to tremendous individuality, but the problem with no God is we become God. And we feel as though we can impose our will on others as well. And that's the issue in China, where I live, where we never really had a God. We had an emperor. So, but the idea that one person can become God has led to a very cruel and unjust world. So I would say there are strengths and weaknesses to all systems. But I would say that it is part of the human condition that we constantly shift and challenge our pre-existing conceptions of God, and that's what allows for a lot of progress.
Why did they actually kill Jesus?
Okay, well, first of all, we don't really know they killed Jesus. Because if you look at the Islamic tradition, there is Jesus. Jesus is the penultimate prophet. Muhammad is the ultimate prophet. And if you look at the Quran, if you look at the Islamic tradition, Jesus never died. He was never crucified. He just died peacefully and he went up to heaven. Because the idea is that if you're a messenger of God, it doesn't really matter if you die or not. What matters is, are you able to deliver the message properly? And Jesus was able to do that. So Jesus is revered in the Islamic tradition. And there are different sects of Christianity. For example, the Gnostics, who don't really care and don't really even talk about his death. Because for them, death is rebirth. Death is release. This planet that we're on is hell on earth. We're here to enlighten others. But once we finish our job, then we return home to wherever we came from. And so death is just release. It's rebirth. It doesn't really matter if you die. So there are people who don't believe that Jesus died. And there are people who believe it didn't really matter how he died. but obviously, the story of the crucifixion is something that compels people and which drives people into this tremendous emotional angst. You have a lot of war started over this issue, right? So my understanding is that if you look at the historical evidence, Jesus was probably crucified by because of his and he was probably crucified based on the practice, meaning that as well as the Jewish law. And I think that by himself. Something along the lines of process enlightenment. Otherwise, we become slaves to the system. just give it for free to the British, right? And so nationalism. How this is instantly so if you go to you would think that these Islamic extremists would hate Jews the most. But for whatever reason, they've never guys, right? If they got the internet, blockchain, it's just more of an enclosed model of the internet, right? Where the internet is open, the blockchain is actually people won't put their money into Bitcoin. They'll like, I mean, why would I do that? You have to ask yourself this question: where are the blockchain servers located? Right? Because I imagine you're able to control the hardware, you can also control the software. I don't care what they tell me about open source and all that. I want to know where the databases are, where the servers are, physically.
It's interesting too that it's designed like a religion.
I'll tell something else. else, okay? Mark Zuckerberg.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Yeah.
So Mark Zuckerberg had his conflict with the Winklevoss. The
Winklevoss twins. Yeah.
The Winklevoss twins, okay? And so the Winklevoss twins sued Mark Zuckerberg, claiming that Zuckerberg stole the idea of Facebook broke up. And this went to court. And there was a settlement. I forget the amount, okay? But then the Winklevoss twins took a sizable portion of the settlement and put it all in Bitcoin. Like, $200 into Bitcoin when it's like this anomaly. Why would we do that?
They're the largest individual owners today, I believe.
I don't know that, but I'm saying, like, back then, when this was a novelty, when this was a niche thing, and these are not technologies, right? How do they put $100 into this thing? That's really strange.
Do you have any 401k or IRA or happen to have money in crypto because you're definitely going to hear about this? See, the biggest supporters of this podcast right now are the guys over at iTrustCap. And when they first reached out to me and explained what they did, it literally sounded like a cheat code. See, with their platform, you can convert your existing 401k or IRA into one that lets you buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, and over 80 cryptocurrencies while maintaining the same tax-saving benefits. Now, of course, you can start a new IRA within if you're bullish on Bitcoin and you want to save on taxes if you ever decide to cash out. But if there's someone who already has a lot of crypto and you're worried about getting hacked or stolen, iTrust also offers a PCA account, which is institutional credible custody, meaning your assets are fully insured, ultra secure, and never sitting on any risky exchanges. So if you guys want to get access, just go to jackneil.com/iTrust or scan the QR code on the screen. Again, that is jackneil.com/iTrust or hit the first link in the description for an easy $100 bonus. But anyway, I guess. You said figures like Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates are not geniuses, but Sam Altman invented ChatGPT, LLMs, Steve Jobs, and invented iPhone. Do you think the government invented social media and AI?
So you go back to the 70s. The government had a huge credibility problem. And the Pentagon had almost wanted to do the internet. I just saw that in school. Right? They wanted to promote the internet and computers as a way to control people. But the problem is, Americans had this experience of Vietnam War. And there were the church community of girls. And so I think we CIA was this is illegal organization. So there's actually no choice. There was also Watergate areas. Before that, the assassinations of like Martin Luther King, JFK, RFK. Okay, so the government had actually no trust in government. So we needed a strategy of how to make people believe computers were safe and cute and not crazy. And the strategy of the government is let's just open source this. Who knows? Right? So if you're able to sell computers to the public, you can make dollars. Right? So Steve Jobs, of course, Steve Wozniak. At the time, you will know that Steve Wozniak was an employee of Hewlett Packard, which is the guy's product. And so whatever he created actually belonged as an IP to HP. Right? So Steve Wozniak creates this open source computer. And then he goes to his superiors and he says, look, I will figure out if you guys are regular features. consider also some parts of Google because Larry Page and Sergey Brin, because like they built Google at Stanford, right? Because you have access to all of Stanford's technology and expertise. But when Steve was next designing the Apple computer, we said no, we don't want anything. We don't need phones.
Pon en mudo.
And that's just why would they do that? civilization that's come before us. When I don't think that's actually true. When I think that, you know, if you go and you explore these indigenous communities around the world, maybe the natives, the Inuits, happy people with a deep we're just these empty vessels trying to increase the number of bank account for no particular reason. We don't have a story of who we are, what we're doing here, and where we're going. They do. And I think that's what gives them joy and purpose in life.
What do you think elites believe is the secret to living properly?
Okay, so the elites are actually obsessed with living forever, and there are different reasons why this is the case. Some have speculated that it's because they in their hearts know all the evil they've done, so they're afraid of like the reckoning when they face God. They're afraid of like being held accountable for their actions. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is they're just really happy with the life they have here, so they want to maintain that. They're afraid of like when they die, they lose everything. So I think both are possibilities. But I think that the body is not the secret to eternal life. So you look at someone like Peter Attia. I'm not sure if you've seen his work. But he talks about how to live longer and healthier, right? He's very expensive. I mean, you know, he'll charge someone I think $100,000 a year just to consult on how to live a lifestyle that allows for maximum health in the long term. Okay, so people like Peter Attia, you get people like Brian Johnson, who is trying to live for as long as he can. There's a lot of money put into longevity research, but I think it's all the wrong approach. I think the secret is not the body, the secret is the mind, right? So I go to Donald Trump because he's a very interesting case study for me, where we've never had someone who's been able to capture global attention for so long, right? Before, you might be famous in your community, but that was it. But now with movies, with the internet, with digitalization, Donald Trump lives rent-free in the minds of billions of people. There are people who like literally wake up every morning and they're like, oh, what is Donald Trump doing today? So they go online, they read the news, they are fascinated with this guy. They think about him all the time. And so we never had a time when so many people were focused on one person. And my question is, will Donald Trump ever die? Because I understand, yes, he eats McDonald's every single day. I understand he is fat and old, but we never had a situation where the entire world is focused on every second.
Qué lindo.
The speech
¿Qué les parece?
of one person. You just look at how he
Bueno,
speaks.
falta poner el 10
It's always with the press, right? It's always
acá arriba.
through social or giving a press conference or talking to a reporter. It's amazing how
Y
reporters in Washington DC
listo.
are like, oh my God, I can call the
Terminó.
United States and they'll talk to me for an hour. It's like literally like any journalist in Washington DC could do this.
Qué
He gets his phone number,
bonito.
and he's the president of the United States. And call him up. And they'll tell
Con
him what he's
retazos.
thinking and all that. So it's a very strange situation. And you
Qué
have to
hermoso.
ask yourself,
Una obra de arte.
well, I think he's doing that because he craves the attention. Because he wants to live
¿A quién le gustaría hacer uno?
with the whole world.
Qué lindo.
We never had something like that
Qué
before,
bonito.
right? So let's go back to the
Qué
idea
bonito.
that consciousness
Bueno,
is
tengo que
versus
hacer
reality. What this means is
muchos
that
más de
we kind of
estos.
own individual reality. Now,
Bueno, vamos a ver si podemos hacer el 10.
if we all have
Puede ser uno
consciousness
rojo.
in our minds, Donald Trump becomes a convergence of all individual reality.
Y yo corto tiras de 5 centímetros más o menos.
What we call God. And this is 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 what we call God
para no sufrir con la escasez de bies.
that by constantly
No le pongo un bies comprado, sino que corto uno yo.
by giving our psychic attention, are we basically
Ay,
manifesting God
qué lindo.
so that
Betty World 1876. Hola. Fernando
perceive or imagine
Sin-
or desire a world
Signoli.
without him? There's
Hola.
an addiction to Donald Trump today, right? Remember how boring Joe Biden was?
Tengo que
Right?
cortar la pila de
Oh
bies.
my God, please go away. I don't want to think about you anymore. We had Joe Biden, like, who, no one remembers what happened during Joe Biden, right? And now with Donald Trump, which is like, we're back to constantly fretting about the world, constantly cursing, we're constantly giving all our attention. And my question is, will he die? And I fear that he won't die. I think that's a secret to longevity, where you are able to implant yourself in the consciousnesses of so many people that their consciousness creates a reality in which you can inhabit.
It's really fascinating if you look at the history of memes. I think it was Richard Dawkins that had proposed like memetics in the first place. And
2
Trump is the
inches.
greatest meme of all time. And you know this because the greatest meme coin, Trump coin. So it signals, I don't know, it's what really gives a god power when you think about it. Do you think the answer is just attention, your active consciousness?
Yes. He's a psychic demon, okay? And you feed a psychic demon through intense emotions. And there's so many intense emotions surrounding Donald Trump. They hate him or love him. He doesn't care because all emotions that empowers him, right? For him, hate, love is the same thing. So again, this is a thought experiment. But the question is he gonna die? Because he's not gonna go away, okay? As long as he can stay in that office, he's not gonna die. And like quite honestly, there's no way to get rid of him now.
Do you think the elite believe they're from sacred bloodlines?
Oh, absolutely.
Is it all the one bloodline or is it like...
Está repitiendo todo lo que él dijo en sus lecciones, Dios mío.
I think it's a scheme theory where you're born into power privilege. You go to
Rojo.
places like Andover, Yale, Harvard Law School, and you meet people who are smarter than you are. So how do you explain to yourself why you're more powerful than these people? And the answer is, my blood is better. My blood is pure. I have dragon blood. I have divine blood from Hercules, from Achilles, Maximum the Great. That's why I should rule the world. Because I'm going to go by precision. I'm not going to admit that this other guy is better than I am. I should rule. And the best explanation for why I should rule is because I've always ruled. Because I'm a reincarnation of a divine being on Earth. Right? And that's something that Jeffrey Epstein believed.
That's a fascinating one. I'm sure you could look at the history of like these ancestry.coms and 23andMe's, and I'm sure it's strange, but because how else would you determine the bloodline without the DNA test?
And you shouldn't actually participate in any of those things. Because a conspiracy theory, okay, I'll just throw this out there, okay, but a conspiracy theory is that they want certain bloodlines, and they use these websites to find certain bloodlines.
So if you're in that bloodline,
Bad things could happen to you. Why is there so much human trafficking in the United States? They care a lot about bloodlines, right? So if they believe that they are of divine bloodline, they would also want to prevent others of divine bloodline from accessing power, right? They would want to step out other bloodlines. They could also drink the blood of other bloodlines to increase their own bloodline. Again, this conspiracy theory, I have no evidence this is the case, but if you were to actually examine how these people think, and these people are like insane, this makes sense.
so what bloodline would you have to be for them to... Would you have to be of that 13 families, or would you be of just not that?
I think that it depends on the group you look at. I think there's something called the 13 Bloodlines, which traces themselves back to Roman Empire, basically. But then you have the 17 Frankists, who are maybe about 300 families. And Jeffrey Epstein was of the bloodline of the 17 Frankists. So there's overlap, but there's also some distinctions. So, honestly, I have not done much research into these bloodlines because I think it's not really helpful. I'm more interested in ideas. Because these people are not smart, and the behavior is sort of preordained. You know exactly how to behave. I'm much more interested in people like Donald Trump, who, regardless of what you think about him, he actually has an imagination. He actually
Has a connection to the divine, perhaps.
he thinks he does, and he probably does.
Something I found fascinating from our conversation yesterday when we had a chat was that you have a belief that there isn't like one most powerful person in the world.
Yeah.
And that logics out to me. And it also logics out to me that we'd be allowed to say it because the person who thinks they're the most powerful in the world would want us to say their name.
Exactly. Exactly right.
And the person, I don't think it's necessary.
So I mean, they say like these secret societies are promoted by secret societies, right? So it was founded at the end of who was formerly a Jesuit, and the Jesuits were crypto Jews. And Mayor Rothschild, and they formed the Illuminati. Society. And the major problem is actually recruitment. Your organization. Okay, so he created the myth that conquer the world. And infiltrated throughout Freemasons as well. And they're conspiring to overthrow these dynasties of Europe, right? And so he was the one who was promoting this myth. Because if you're just this average Joe and you read about these guys, you're like, this is actually pretty cool. Yeah, I should join these guys. And it gives them much more political leverage, right? So that's what people don't really appreciate about the Illuminati. It's actually more of a PR campaign than it is actually a powerful force in the world. But again, remember, this goes back to Donald Trump and Plato's Cave. Consciousness is reality itself. If you can't make enough people believe this to be true, it becomes true.
You've talked about various secret societies. You've talked about various psyops, made different predictions about the system. Is there anything that you, Professor Zhang, are allowed to say?
I think that if you refer to certain individuals and their actions, they would come after you. Because as long as you talk in the abstract, like, okay, this is how societies rule the world, that's fine. They don't care. No one cares. You talk about how Jeffrey Epstein is connected to this person, and it's this person that finds certain behavior. This would create problems for him, and then it would create problems for you. So I think naming names, going into specifics is a problem. The problem is, let's say I have access to confidential information that someone shared with me. If I were to reveal that to you, well, that would be a problem, because then I would have betrayed that person. And I don't do that because I don't know any powerful people, and no one's ever told me any secrets, right? So a lot of things I do is based on speculation, based on analysis, and no one cares if you do that. But again, if you name someone powerful and you reveal certain of his behavior, that can be that can be used as legal evidence against him. That can cause for incrimination against him. That would be a problem. If you had information revealed to you by a confidential source, and you were to reveal this confidential information to other people, and make it public, that would suggest moral intuition as well. So I would say these two things.
most of your critics say that what you're doing is technically illegal in your home country, and the only reason you haven't gotten in trouble is because you're a CCP asset or a CIA asset or an MI6 asset. Professor Zhang, are you a spy?
Okay, sure. So let me respond to the question: how am I allowed to do what I do in China? And the reason is that I'm actually not part of the Chinese system. So the Chinese system is set up to control the behavior of Chinese citizens. And so it's a very complicated bureaucracy. I'm not a Chinese citizen. I'm not a participant in the Chinese system. I'm a foreigner hired to teach English at a private school. That's my identity. That's my role in China. And foreigners are given a lot of leeway in a gray zone where we don't really matter, and we're sort of like tolerated, but we don't really matter. Okay. And so an example of this is if you're the Chinese AI surveillance group, meaning that everything that you say is monitored, everything that when you use any Chinese payment system is constructed to profile you, okay? But it's a system designed for Chinese citizens. You're not interested in individual people. So you're trying to figure out this person's profile in the social network and then use mechanisms to manipulate that social network. Okay? Does that make sense to you? I'm not part of the system. Whatever I do does not impact how the system is run and managed. It's meant to control people internally, not external to it. So that's actually no desire to conquer the world because it'd be a pain in the ass. That's what I'm talking about. As long as I'm not on social media in China, public speeches in China, as long as I don't talk to Chinese reporters, I don't matter in the system. Okay? And this is a caveat. The moment I decide, you know what, I want to be famous in China. I want to set up I want to give some now no problem. I choose freedom. I also choose not to engage in lucrative opportunities in China. But if I were to engage in lucrative opportunities, then I would be expected to say certain things that promote the party line in the world and in China.
Like if you saw an American influencer, perhaps, speaking Chinese to a classroom of American students, and they were talking about the topics you're talking about, but like for China, like what would you think that is going on? Random question, really quick. Have you ever looked up if the shampoo you're using can disrupt
Ay,
your
por el amor de
hormones?
Dios.
Because if you're like me,
Why he's doing what he's doing, and I'd be confused as to how he's able to get away with this crap.
do you feel like your answers so far have answered pretty fully?
If you just go to my history, I do all sorts of strange things. People who know me aren't surprised by what I do. They're surprised by how famous I've become. But they're not surprised by what I do. I'm just a strange guy, right? Because I went to Yale, and I come to China, and I spend my entire life just teaching. And I'm like impoverished as compared to my Yale classmates, right? Who've become lawyers and doctors who live very respectable lives on the Upper West Side in New York. So when I first got into Yale, all my cousins hated me because now they're under pressure to get into the Ivy League as well. Then like 10 years later, I hear a story of how my cousin got into a fight with his mother, and his mother said to him, "You have to work harder because you want to be like Uncle Jam and get into Yale." And then the cousin was like, "Yeah, Mom, but he went back to China." And that ended the conversation. I was never mentioned again in that household. Good. So I mean, my entire my relatives, my family is shocked by how strange I am. Like you go to Yale, like you win the lottery, and you decide, you know what, I'm gonna just for away and go to a place where my other reading doesn't really matter, where I can't become a doctor or a lawyer. I can only become a high school teacher. So I'm just a strange person in general. And then in 2008, I built China's first public school international program to send Chinese kids to America for college. And at that time, this was a new field, and everyone knew it was like a rocket ship. I could become a millionaire just helping Chinese kids apply to university. And a lot of people did become millionaires. But after a couple of years of doing that, I walked away because I didn't want to do this for the rest of my life. I didn't want to become a business person. I didn't want to make millions of dollars getting rich kids into Yale and Harvard. I walked away. I worked for the United Nations in 2006. And look, when you work for the United Nations, it is the cushiest, easiest life anyone can live, okay? It is the silliest thing ever to exist. But like, I literally was making 6 figures doing nothing every day, just sitting in my office and pretending to type on a keyboard. And and like, if I had a family, every one of my kids would be given free international schooling. If I flew around, it'd be business class. I'd be given a pension after 10, 20 years, a full pension. I was treated like royalty wherever I went because I'm the United Nations. And I walked away because I thought it was a meaningless existence. So myself. People think my friends tell me, they don't understand why I do what I do. So it's led me to this point. And again, like my friends are not surprised by what I do. I just teach conspiracy theories in high school. Like that's just part of my personality. Like, I'm surprised. I have like 2 million followers right now on YouTube. Right? They're kind of surprised by that. It's like, and like these are Yale, Harvard people, right? So they're very conservative. They have a very rigid worldview, and they don't understand how I'm able to teach and be so popular in the world.
Did you manifest this?
That's a really good question. The short answer is yes, but the real answer is I imagine this possibility, right? But the thing though is that I am a writer by training. Like I write books, and so I imagine things all the time. I imagine that this could be a possibility one day. And I position myself, I maneuver myself into this position. So 5 years ago, during COVID, I was so upset about COVID. It really annoyed me how the entire world just shut up its way, right? It's like, okay, well, this vaccine, well, we don't know if it works, but some scientists said it works, so it must work, so I'll just put it in my body, hope for the best. It's just insane. And I think that's influenced by social media, by the internet. So I was watching a lot of Joe Rogan, I was watching a lot of Jimmy Dore, I was watching, and I became drawn to alternative media because I like debate, I like conversation, I like exploration. It seemed to me like Joe Rogan, Weinstein, these were people that were trying to see the world, that were really questioning the world. And I was like, I would one day like to be on a show. I feel that's where I could go. And so, okay, if I want to be like them, because only by being like them can I appear high school teacher to be on the show. That makes me so distinct that I might pop on social media. And my solution was, I make stupid predictions and hope they turn out correct. And if they are correct, I will get on social media. But if they are correct, then I might get onto a course. So that was my strategy and planning when I started the YouTube channel. It sounds so silly, right?
Are you telling me that you didn't believe those predictions?
So I believe my predictions. I believe it would turn out the way they did very strongly. Because remember, I had to, first of all, explain my predictions and justify my predictions. And then I also take myself and put it on YouTube, right? Which means that now there's a historical record that I made these predictions. And I would only do that if I truly believed in them. But what happened was that
¡Tarán!
for the past 5-6 years,
¡Qué
I was having
lindo!
conversations with friends. And we'd have these silly arguments about geopolitics. Like,
Bueno, busquen sus retazos, los encuentran, los cortan, los unen, los planchan, les hacen el bordado y yo les mando el molde. Gracias. Gracias a todos. Chao.
I also predicted that Trump would win in